Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mountain Lake Journal. I'm Tom Alek. This week, we're going to be joined by some of my fellow journalists who cover the news here in northern New York to talk about what's been making news this holiday season, both here in the North Country as well as at the state capitol in Albany. We're going to focus on stories that our panelists, our guests, have been reporting on. But then we're also going to go more in-depth behind the headlines. Joining us this week are Pat Bradley, who is the North Country Bureau Chief for WAMC Northeast Public Radio. Alek LaShomb is the Plattsburgh Bureau Chief for WCAX Television. And Carly Newton writes for the Press Republican newspaper here in Plattsburgh. Welcome to you all. It's nice to have you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Well, let's get started. Lots of political news this month, which you usually don't have in December. After Election Day in November, often it quiets down during the holidays, but not this year. Kind of a domino effect going on here after Elise Stefanik, just a few days after Election Day, announced that she was running for governor. We now have another Republican getting into this race, and that's Bruce Blakeman. He is the Nassau County executive, and that sets up a likely primary between Elise Stefanik and Bruce Blakeman, which is not what Elise Stefanik wanted. When she announced, a couple of days after Election Day, she talked about all the endorsements that all the people behind her, Ed Cox, the party chair for the state, and others that were throwing their weight behind her, and she kind of hoped that that would clear the field for her, but that didn't turn out to be the case.
I don't think it's just Elise Stefanik. I think the GOP leaders in New York also didn't want to see a primary. They want to see a unified front, and the fact that you have two candidates both considered highly supportive of MAGA, could, create a problem for them. You'll have the infighting from the two candidates through most of next year.
For endorsements, you mentioned the state party endorsing for that one, but I think the endorsement that's going to matter in this is what President Trump decides. Exactly. He's already said both candidates are great, so which one is he going to go with?
Blakeman's well known on Long Island, where he's the county executive. Has he made any trips up this way, any word if he's coming up this way, and that we've heard in the next few weeks?
Not that I've heard.
Yeah, same. I haven't heard that he's planning a trip up here, but if he's running for governor, I'm assuming it'll happen sooner or later.
Most folks up here in the North Country firmly behind Stefanik?
Will they vote for an incumbent politician for a different role? I think that might be likely, just judging by her history here in the district and her role. But yeah, it's really the question of whether or not when he comes up here, how that will sway certain voters.
Of course, with Elise Stefanik running for governor now, we're right back where we were a year ago with her giving up her seat in Congress. Of course, she was nominated to be the UN ambassador a year ago, and then that nomination put on hold by the president, who asked her to withdraw so that the Republicans could keep their slim majority in the House. And so that never happened. The special election never happened, but now it is happening. New York 21 is an open seat this year, and we've got some of the same players going this time around that did last time. Among the Democrats, Blake Gendamine is still in the race. He ended up being the nominee for the Democrats in the 15 counties that make up New York 21. Two others are in the race, Dylan Hewitt, and also a restaurant owner from Lake Placid who jumped into the race just about a week ago, Stuart Emerald. What do we know about him? Is he new to politics? I haven't heard about him. I don't think he's involved in local politics in Lake Placid.
I've not had a chance to interview him yet. He owns a pub in downtown Lake Placid. Yep. He's never run for office before. Even his website hasn't been completely completed yet.
So the question is now, who for Republicans is going to step up on that side? And the interesting development over there is we're still trying to figure out who might potentially run. We know State Senator Dan Steck, who was the front runner last time, he said he's not going to run.
Robert Smullen represents the state assembly, but in a district that is in the very southern part of the district.
Southwestern part of New York 21, Gloversville, Johnstown, that area.
So a lot of folks may not be familiar with him. And then the other Republican right now is Anthony Constantino,
Yep.
who also made a bid for the Republican nomination before Stefanik returned to the House.
Right, when a number of Republicans were reaching out to the party chair saying, hey, pick me, I want to be the nominee for this special election. And
Yeah.
Constantino, the CEO of Sticker Mule in Amsterdam, a businessman, got into the race back then, certainly MAGA, and he
Yes.
is a heavy-duty MAGA, and he has said he is going to finance his own campaign and run again this time around and challenge whatever Republicans also want to run in this race in the primary. What's interesting about this is who's not running. Last time around, there were 3 front runners. None of them are in the race this time around. Liz Choi, who is a former congressional candidate, ran against Poltanko back in the day twice. Chris Tegg, an assemblyman from Schoharie County, has decided instead to run for an open New York State Senate seat. And Dan Steck, Dan announcing just a couple of days after Elise Stefanik made it official, her bid for governor, that he was not going to seek her seat. Meantime, Governor Hochul has decided in just the past few weeks that she's going to close another prison, Bear Hill Correctional Facility in Malone. The announcement made just a few days before Thanksgiving. Tough time of year for folks in a community to hear that one of their prisons is closing, and certainly the case here. And unhappiness about the loss of 300 jobs between corrections officers and paid staff, right?
Yeah, and I think the sentiment out there too is not only a tough time of the year, but it's just a tough year in general for corrections officers out that way when it was the Wildcat strikes earlier this year, and then Bear Hill closing, of course. And, speaking with the state and trying to find out what that rationale was for that, I mean, they cited the lower prison population and lower staffing as well there that they could better use elsewhere, and then nobody else would lose their job. But for sure, people in Malone feeling a bit down by the decision.
They think this is payback. A number of people do. I think that this is retaliation because of the Wildcat strike.
Well, I know that was a sentiment during the strike, was that, well, what's going to happen when we come back from this? Is there going to be repercussions such as that? Are more prisons going to close? And I think a lot of them were holding their breath this time of the year as budget talks come up and word of more closures coming about. I think that this is something they were worried about.
And Docs is quick to point out that there are open jobs at other prison facilities, other correctional facilities within the region, within Clinton, Franklin, and Essex counties, that the workers who are being laid off will be able to get those jobs if they want.
That is true. I think there are some concerns, though, by the union, and especially the mayor there in the village of Malone, that even going from Malone to Dannemora, even though that might be, 20, 30 minutes of a drive, it's still driving in the Adirondacks, the winter elements right now. It can make it be a much tougher drive than, say, if you live 5 minutes away. So the question is where in the Tri-County area you're going to get relocated to.
Exactly. And you talked with businesses there when you were there that day. They're obviously concerned. It is a prison community, and to lose one of their prisons could very well have an impact on local businesses.
Yeah. Yep.
And the mayor, Andrea Dumas, talking about, okay, you're making this decision. We're going to keep the lights on at Bear Hill. This is the same thing that so many other communities have faced. What are you going to do now as a state to help us find someone to come in and use these facilities?
And that's the question, too. Who's going to pay the cost for that? I know that's being negotiated right now, and that's something she's expressed she'd like to get figured out with the states. But we've looked at other communities like Mariah, for example, where the town supervisor there has had his dispute with Docs about who pays for Mariah's shock, because that was being passed on. So it'll be interesting to see if Docs does continue to pay for the lights and whatnot there.
Tough news for Michael Cashman, the new assemblyman from here in the North Country, 115th District. He was sworn in just a few days before the announcement came, and so I don't know if he was blindsided by this, but that's tough for him to suddenly, his first few days in office, be losing a prison.
Well, he campaigned on this, right? He talked a lot about how he was against prison closures and more in the future. So for him to, have to deal with this right as he gets into office, I'm sure is not something he wanted to deal with. But I don't think this will be the last time either. So probably good experience for him to how to figure out how to prevent this in the future.
The governor, we talked about the governor. She has been facing a tough decision as we head for the end of the year. She's been signing hundreds of bills that were passed by the legislature this past year. One that she's been holding off on is the medical aid in dying, which is highly controversial. Just this week now, we're taping midweek, we haven't had an indication from her which way she was going to go. The last couple of weeks, she's been saying she wanted to add some amendments if she was going to agree to sign the bill. Now it appears that she is going to sign it. She sent an opinion piece to the Times-Union newspaper this week where she said she will do it if some of these conditions, amendments are agreed to, and it appears that that may indeed be the case. So as we head for the end of the week, we don't know when it will happen, but it does appear she's going to sign this now.
So I'm proud to announce that after weeks of negotiating with the legislature, we are now going to be making medical aid in dying available to New Yorkers going forward.
Yeah, her opinion piece in the Times-Union does very much indicate that. She noted that it was a difficult decision, but she had watched her own mother die from ALS, and that factored into her decision. So as she says, I am all too familiar with the pain of seeing someone you love suffer and feeling powerless to stop it.
Now, she did ask for, and it looks as if she's going to get, she wanted some conditions attached to this, the amendments that she talked about. What were some of the things that she wanted to add on to the bill? One was a waiting
protections,
period.
Including, the waiting period. I think the bill, you had mentioned 7 days.
She had talked 7 days originally.
And now in her letter, it's 5 days.
Okay.
So a 5-day waiting period. There's also, making sure that people are not pressured into their decision, having 2 doctors confirm a terminal diagnosis.
Yep. The governor had talked about, just a few weeks ago, putting it off for a year, its implementation, but it appears that in her op-ed, there's no mention of that whatsoever, so it appears that it may, in fact, be happening. Let's focus a little bit on what you folks have been reporting on. Carly, you wrote a piece this past week about the big multi-million-dollar project to redo Cornelia Street in Plattsburgh, which has been talked about for a number of years now. Yeah. That's moving ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they're going through some approval. They just had an approval with the council the beginning of the month. Her hope is that they get a final approval, likely spring of next year. Some extra design final approval, stuff like that. They hope construction will start in the spring of 2027.
Okay.
That's the estimated time. Stuff like this doesn't always go to plan. Sometimes stuff comes up. But that's a big project that's been in the works for a long time.
Mayor Chris Rosenquist had talked about it. It was a priority for him. He wanted to add the bike lanes. He wanted to fix that area. That's the same area where this will happen, right?
Yes.
Sort of around the Y there between Cornelia and Broad. And what will they be doing there? What will some of the major changes be?
So they're going to add bike lanes, like you said. They're going to widen the street. They're going to fix up the sidewalks, put sidewalks in where there aren't any right now, because that's been a major concern for a while, is the walkability aspect in that area of the city. And in addition to that, they're going to fix up the water and sewer lines. Those are pretty old there. It's similar to the Margaret Street construction project a few years ago. The water and sewer lines there were pretty old and needed to be replaced, and similar to that, this is going to be that. While they fix up the street, that will be done.
How many $million project is this, and paid for primarily by the state and federal government, or is some of this going to fall on taxpayers?
So the consulting firm that did the design plans put out a number. I believe it was about $14.9 million. So far the city's gotten about $1.5 million for funding just for the design plans.
Okay.
I'm assuming that they'll try to get funding going forward. That's the plan, at least.
So that it doesn't fall back onto the city
Yeah.
taxpayers.
But like with the Market Street construction project, they had to use quite a bit of their general fund to fund that.
Alek, you this week have been reporting on a new warming center opening in Plattsburgh. This is something that's been talked about for a few years now, the need for one.
Yeah, no, for quite a while now, the previous commissioner, Christine Peters, she had said, we're exploring the possibility of a warming center. At the time, it was a few people were mentioned on who would take this on, but now officially it's the county, it's ETC, as well as NAMI, as well, that's staffing this center, and yes, officially opening as of this week.
It's right next door to the new crisis center that just opened last fall. So those two are over on the MHEB campus, one of their dormitories, the bottom floor, both the crisis center, 24-hour crisis center, and now the warming center.
Yep, yeah, sharing a wall right there, crisis center on the other side. The entrance for the warming center won't be through the front entrance of that crisis stabilization center, but rather on the side, taking the sidewalk, middle of the building. So.
And not a homeless shelter, not the same.
No, and the county's tried to make that distinction. This is really only for during the cold blue season, and what that's classified as New York State, is when the temperature is below the real feel of 32 degrees. So during the nights between 6 p.m. 9 a.m. is when it will be open for people to get shelter for that night, to get warm, to get connected to services if they need them.
Pat, you reported on a ceremony at the White House this past week honoring the members of the gold medal winning 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team. Given a Congressional gold medal at a signing ceremony hosted by President Trump.
This is one of the highest honors that can be given to a civilian in the United States. And the Congressional Gold Medal bill, actually, the gold medals will not go to each individual team member, although they were all there for the signing. And if any of the original team members have passed, family members were there. So there was this huge crowd behind Donald Trump as he signed the bill. But what the bill calls for is for only 3 medals to be minted, and then they will go to museums: the Lake Placid Olympic Museum, the Olympic and Paralympic Museum, and the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. So they will hold those medals, honoring the entire team for the Miracle on Ice. And it's interesting that they're getting this medal like 45 years after they won gold in the Olympics.
But still, that'll be nice, especially if one of those medals is at the museum right in Lake Placid. Carly, you this week also reported on some neighbors that came to the rescue of a resident, a fire in Rouse's Point, and thank goodness they were there to help that resident.
Yeah, and it's, I guess, a change of pace from what we normally report. I mean, obviously the fire was bad, but to have something good come out of it, where neighbors come in and they see the smoke coming out of the house and they rush over there and try to get her out of there before the fire department even shows up. And the fire was in Rouse's Point on Clinton Street. The house was a total loss, very devastating this time of the year, obviously. The fire chief, though, he was very thankful that the neighbors rushed to the rescue and got them out before they even got there.
Does he think that made a difference, that potentially if they hadn't acted so quickly?
I believe so. He said he was just very thankful because they saved her life, is how he put it. She had some smoke inhalation in her lungs, but she was released from the hospital, I think, that same day, he said. So yeah, it was a good story to hear about. Obviously, it's horrible to lose your home this time of the year, but this time of the year in the North Country is common for fires, and he pointed that out.
This is also the time of year, Alek, you covered the Christmas Bureau. The Clinton County Christmas Bureau has done fantastic work for decades now, and they raise a lot of money, and they help out a lot of families this time of year.
Yeah, no, it sounds like shopping this year more so than other years. I mean, I walked in there to, they're building their Plattsburgh Plaza, which is also the last year they're going to be there. They're going to have to find a new place next year in the process of searching for that. But it just seemed much more stocked than previous years, and this is something I had asked about, is this more toys than normal? And there were some shoppers that, in anticipation of tariffs, were buying more toys, worried that the cost might go up, so that did lead to one part of it, but the other part of it as well is just the need they're anticipating this year be a lot closer, maybe to 1,000 families being served.
Really, and they not only help with toys, they also collect warm clothes, jackets, boots, mittens, help out a little bit with money for meals. So in a number of ways, they really try to help families in need during the holidays.
Definitely.
Thank you all for taking the time to join us this week, and we'll look forward to having you on in coming weeks as well as we head into a new year. Yes, we'll hear the state of the state in early January from Governor Hochul, new Assemblyman Michael Cashman in his first session, so there will be a lot to talk about in the coming new year, and we'll look forward to doing that with you. But thank you. Happy holidays to you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.